Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening from, and welcome to 1% Better, where we take a look at hidden stories in sport. I'm Xylon and I'm joined by Dr. David Lipman. Your medical question today. During prolonged endurance exercise, plasma sodium concentration can actually rise even when total body sodium decreases. How is that possible?
Yeah, it's a concentration measure. It's not a volumetric measure. So the difference here, the problem you have here is concentration versus volumetric. So the total amount of sodium goes down, the volumetric measure goes down, but sodium rises because you're losing more water. So it concentrates. This is the problem when
That's
people
correct.
don't understand this. Oh, I know it's correct, mate, because I understand the physics of it. It's like it's very basic sciences.
Jeez,
It's
calm down.
no, no,
The arrogance. I
no, no.
mean,
But it's because this is something that's often misunderstood. We used to have this issue when we worked at a continuous glucose monitor company. Is people would go like, "Oh, my glucose went up. That means I'm fine." It's like, well, it could also mean that you're dehydrated, right? Like, so understanding the difference between concentrations and volumetric measures is really important. So glucose is a concentration measure for the most part. Similarly, lactate is a concentration measure. So those things are also then affected by things like hydration status as well.
glucose, why can it go up if you're dehydrated?
Because it's a concentration.
Yeah, but
This
break
is the
it
whole point I'm
down.
making
Just,
here.
just, just explain. Just break it down,
So,
even further.
okay, if my concentration is 10 grams per milliliter, just for very round numbers, for those who work in imperial units, don't worry about it. If it's 10 grams per milliliter and the milliliters, that's a fraction, right? And the milliliters goes down, that same 10 grams then becomes a higher concentration,
Right.
right? Even though the total amount you have is the same. Conversely, you can have changes in changes in the fluid levels or the solute levels both can affect things. So they can both go in the same direction. They can both go in opposite directions. They can both stay stable. So it's complicated in that respect with regard to the kinetics.
So ChatGPT said because the body loses proportionally more water than sodium through sweating and respiration, leading to hypernatremic dehydration. Plasma sodium concentration reflects relative balance, not total content. And then it gives a fun follow-up line here. It says, so you can literally get saltier while losing salt. It makes sense only to doctors and pickled cucumbers.
I
ChatGPT is trying to
mean,
be funny. Oh.
yeah.
Um, we are supported by Precision Fuel and Hydration. They are the title sponsor of Marbella Ironman 70.3 World Championships happening this weekend. We're going to take a look at that coming up. But if you are a fan of Precision Fuel and Hydration, like we are, use the product long before their sponsorship started, we do have a discount code for you on your first order. You will get 15% off if you use the following code 1PB2025. That's the number 1PB2025. We also have a direct link in the show notes that'll apply that discount, taking you to the shop. Dave, you ran a 5K on the treadmill. Are you training for the treadmill world championships that we spoke about last weekend?
No, but I figured I may as well have a bit of a crack at this. This is the nice thing about not exercising and just also not training and just exercising is that like you can do things. You're like, bugger it, I'll just
I
have a
love that.
crack. And so I was
I
like,
love that.
yeah, I was just
Oh.
like, why not have a crack? So I was like, all right, I'll have a crack at this and see how we go. Partially to see how I'm going fitness wise or performance wise. But also I was like, let's see how this 5K on the treadmill goes. Now, when I'm in, or historically, when I've been at, in marathon training, deep in marathon training, you've got a really good handle on what you can run at any time, right? So you go like, oh, okay, I'm pretty comfortable to go 18:30 or 17 minutes or whatever, right? And the problem I had was like, I have no idea what I can hold for 5Ks now. Like, I've got no concept. I know what like I'd love to hold. So I was like, all right. And I also know what a 5K time trial feels like, which is pretty horrific at about 3Ks. And I was thinking, well, if you cook that and you're feeling horrific at 2Ks, it's a bad day, man. And so it was what I found to be really interesting was it was quite hard to know what to set the treadmill to, because in an overground running, you can just sort of speed up and slow down little bits, and it's okay. You can't really do that well on a treadmill. I mean, you can adjust it a little bit, but it's a bit funny. So anyway, it was really interesting. I ended up running. Oh God, I should have written it in the notes here. It was like 18 something. I was pretty happy. I sped up a bit towards the end, but it certainly wasn't a maximum effort. So I was like, the thing that I took away from that was it's going to be, these people are going to have to be really dialed in. And with the acknowledgement that potentially their treadmill is set differently. So unless you're training in one of these Technogym gyms, which is the whole reason this thing started, it was Technogym's sponsorship, it's going to be quite hard to know exactly how to pace this. But also, you're kind of going to have a good idea from the start within a couple of, within 30 seconds, you'll have within a 30-second bandwidth, you'll know what your performance will be, I'd say. So yeah, it's quite interesting.
A quick question for you. How fast are you running on the treadmill? I'm meaning, do you think we'll see a lot of accidents in the treadmill world championships? Are you running that fast in a 5K, 18 minutes that you could feel like you could lose control?
So I don't think it's about how fast you're actually running in terms of like the ultimate speed, 18 minutes, 13 minutes, 15 minutes. I don't think that's important. What I do think is important is how close to your maximum you go and how able you are to come off that and how comfortable you are on a treadmill. Because I do so much treadmill running, I'm really comfortable on and off the treadmill. I can get on at a fast speed, get off pretty well because of years and years of doing it. But
yeah,
it is. It's learned, right? And so is like getting towards exhaustion and still getting off safely. But I've definitely felt on some stuff I've done recently, not this 5K, that I've been a bit closer to like, that wasn't so like flash there. So I certainly think, and there's this research, if you look at the research on some of the research in the super shoe world, where they're using a lot of Kenyan athletes, you'll often see these things like athletes were not accustomed to the treadmill because they don't do any treadmill running. And I think that's a really important point in general, both from a performance standpoint, which is to say, if you want to perform on a treadmill, you should probably do quite a bit of treadmill running, and also from a safety standpoint, how to get on and off it safely. And if you look at truly maximal testing in an exercise lab, they often wear a harness for this reason. So they just get hoisted if they drop. So they don't eat it. So I would not be surprised if we see a couple of people fall, man. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
But yeah. What about you, man? What have you been up to? Like, first you went on safari with Clara, previous guest here.
Yeah, Clara Koppenberg, she was on here a few months ago. Still our biggest episode to date, I think. She's a professional cyclist and she was out here to race Gravel Burn. What's interesting is, so I've known her for about 10 years. I was a staff member on a team that she was a pro rider of. So she's ridden the Tour de France multiple times, won some big races in world cycling. But she hasn't managed to secure a road contract for next year. So I said to her, hey, do you want to come do Gravel Burn in South Africa? They're looking for professional cyclists for the women's field to pad out. And they've got this package together. And she was like, oh, I haven't really done gravel. I'm not so sure. And then a couple of weeks later, she came back to me. She's like, I've thought about it more. I think I'm going to do it. Like, I'm signing with a team. Like, yeah, I've spoken to a team, and I won't mention the team yet. She'll announce it soon. But anyway, the team was in the Tour de France this year. They're going to sign her as a gravel rider next year. So everything is like transitioned pretty quickly. Within the span of 8 weeks, she's gone from being a professional cyclist on the road for 10 years to going to be a full-time gravel rider next year, which is a new skill. It's new terrain. But what was interesting is this race was 8 days. And traditionally, gravel riders don't have a lot of stage races. Most of the races are 1 days. They're very long. But because she's done so many tours on this during her career, her lack of skill that she still needs to learn on the gravel was supplemented by having raced back-to-back days for a lot of time during her career. So she was just getting stronger and stronger as the race went on. And I think she finished 5th overall after worrying about, I was driving her and Ashley Mullen pursuit to the race, and she was worried about finishing last. I said to her, Clara, you're not going to finish last. You're going to be top 20 at least, I promise you. She says, yeah, there are only 25 pros on the start line. So for sure I'll be top 20. Anyway, she ended up being 5th overall because she just started getting stronger and stronger. But yeah, it was interesting to be around the race and all these professionals.
How did Ashley go?
Oh man, I'm so bummed for her. She was leading the race until the last day, and then she got a puncture that took her about 30 minutes to fix. Again, she's a road cyclist. On the road, you have your backup vehicles, you have mechanics. You don't ever touch your bike. You don't ever do anything. Whereas gravel, it's more self-sufficient. You have to fix your own bike. You got to carry everything with you. So she, unfortunately, I think she did something with a valve. It came out. It wasn't meant to come out when she was plugging her tire. It took her 30 minutes. And she unfortunately lost the lead. I think she finished fourth overall in the end, but yeah, was leading the race until the last hour in the race, was going to win the overall. So I was very, very sad. Yeah, I was bummed for her.
Interesting. I mean, it speaks like there's so many corollaries with that and running, right? It's like trail running with things going wrong, etc. We talked about Jan Frodeno, etc. Like it's all paralleled. It's fascinating stuff, man.
Just quickly, a lot of riders got sick. So how this works is a lot of riders came from Europe here to South Africa, and they were staying in tents. So you camp in tents that the race sets up for you. The first day was rain, 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 full gas, and then the next morning the riders woke up to frost. Even their bikes, like Lara couldn't move her chain for a bike with all the frost on it, and they had to warm up. And then, like 4 or 5 days later, it was like 35 degrees. A lot of riders got sick. Now, can those change in temperatures play on your immune system, or is it everything where there are big market tents where everyone has lunch? There are obviously a lot of hands going through there. So if you're not sanitizing, if you're not careful, there are probably so many variables, But often the first thing athletes point to, is the change in weather when they get sick. Is that a thing?
I think it's always going to be everything. I don't think the change of weather helps. It's an extra stressor, right? In either direction or both directions, which is what you're talking about, right? Both cold and hot. I think sanitation is a huge part of it. And I'm not saying this because it's Africa. I'm saying this because it's tents. I'm saying, as you said, hands everywhere, communal eating, also just different types of food, man. Like it sounds ridiculous, but there's this classic, if you go to Southeast Asia, they talk about barley belly, for instance, and you get, an issue with it, or you go to the subcontinent and you get deli belly. This isn't about a lack of sanitation. It's about different microbes and these sort of things, and people not being accustomed to that. The locals don't get sick from it, but people who are traveling in do. So there's
Is it a
certainly a
different
component of that. I think
bacteria?
different bacteria, different foods, even like different stuff. Like it's probably multifactorial. Again, to very fractal in nature. And I don't want to get like, I don't want to be the guy who goes, it always depends. It's always everything. Like I don't want to be that guy, but I think that's part of it. I also think just stage racing, man. Like stage racing is always a risk. Like look at Tour de France, where you don't have that stuff, and they're like hyper aware of all this infection stuff, and everybody's wearing gloves and sanitizing and all that garbage. Like, and I don't mean garbage like in a negative way. I just mean like all that stuff. Even then, people get sick. So like if you're breathing hard enough for long enough, and your immune system's depressed enough, and you're in close enough quarters of people, eventually something's going to get passed around. That's just the way it is.
I was just, you'll probably find this funny. I was having dinner one of the nights with one of the doctors at the race, and you doctors are so calm. And there was a big crash in the neutral zone. They neutralized one of the stages because the wind was hectic. I don't know how a crash happened in the neutralized zone, and a rider was unconscious for a little bit. But the doctor doesn't panic. The doctor's just like, "Oh, you're fine. You move your around, move your fingers, move your toes. Well, you only have a broken collarbone. That's all." Like gets the guy to come back to you, but like doesn't panic at all out in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, there's some war stories out there. But it was a great event. It was Gravel Burn. Tom Pidcock was there. He won one of the stages. Cam Worth, Lachlan Morton, Alison Jackson. So there's some big hitters. It was a very cool event to be around.
Cool.
We are supported by Stride on this podcast. They are running power meters. Did you see they were at New York Marathon last week? They were exhibiting there as usual. And by the way, we're going to dive into a research paper a little later on where they use Stride to look at marathon performance and durability. But I saw they were on. I was proud of myself because they did their first post from the New York Marathon and their stand, and I was the first to comment on our podcast. 1% Better Instagram profile, man. I was like, that's so professional. We're so good with our sponsors.
Well, thanks, mate. I appreciate that. Yeah, they do this at all the major marathons, man. I went to see them in London, and I went to go talk to the guys, and I could barely get a word in because there were just people stopping by all the time. Like, people really love it. Like, the disciples of Stride really love it, man. It's really cool how strong a brand they've built, and, how they really are helping people to, I guess, get it right from a pacing perspective. That's like one of the big things that they do is around the pacing stuff. So super cool. People stop by, they get all sorts of things. They get photos with them. Like, yeah, it's it's amazing because I don't know how much they sell there. Like I don't know if anybody rolls up to a marathon expo, has never heard of Stride, and then buys a Stride power meter right then and there. I mean, maybe that happens. And, with 50,000 people in New York Marathon or 55,000, maybe that does happen. Maybe there's 2,000
It
or
happens
5,000
for
people that
sure.
do that.
In
But
my experience at expos, it happens. Yeah.
I thought people would be buying stuff they already knew about or whatever. Like, anyway, it's fascinating. Obviously, they're seeing a return on investment, so it's really cool for them, and I'm stoked for them. And yeah, lovely dudes.
If you'd like to check out Stride, we do have a link in the show notes down below. That is a unique code to us, so it helps us out. So we appreciate that. If you do want to help us out further as well, by the way, thanks to everyone who's been commenting on the podcast, sharing the podcast. We are growing steadily. So if you haven't subscribed yet, I'll ask you now to do this. And if you have subscribed, I'll ask you to share the podcast with a friend. David, one thing I've noticed, we've talked about this, is that we're getting a lot of comments on social media about people being confused or disagreeing with us, or saying, "Oh, Captain Obvious, you're saying to drink water, blah, blah, blah. How obvious is that to not be dehydrated?" Uh, one thing I want to say is we are working hard to put out more social content, which I think is why we're getting a lot of these contents, a lot of these comments. But we aren't a clickbait podcast. We don't bring guests on here to try to get them. So for context, you really have to listen to our full episodes where we dive deeper, like give full context for the things we are debating and describing. And that's unfortunately, obviously, that's not the world we live in with regards to social media. So thank you for all the comments. We appreciate it, but we will encourage people who engage with us to please listen to a full episode before engaging. I know it does your head in.
Well, it's both. I can hold multiple things in at the same time, multiple ideas that are opposing at the same time. One thing is every comment, and the more outrage, the better, because that's how the algorithms work, right? If you're getting outraged, you're getting sucked into the algorithm, great, and that helps us grow, right? It pushes us to more people. So there's that. The second thing is it's a medium for long form conversation. And there are certainly podcasts that are made for Instagram. You can see them, and that's not a bad thing. Like, it's just a different thing. We aren't that. We aren't going to be that. We're never going to be that. We're not getting people on here to get like little clickbait answers to put them out in social and, oh, the 5 verse thing is this or whatever. Like, that's just not our brand, and that's okay. Again, those things exist in the world, and some people like them. And there are podcasts where I've never listened to an episode, and I go and consume some of their social. Those exist. Me. So like, fine, great, also okay. Everyone, everything has a place and everyone in a place, but that's just not us. So yeah, we appreciate you all following along. We'd love more people. So follow us on Instagram if you haven't already. Like our stuff, help us share it, all that stuff. But yeah, the answer is usually going to be in the full episode where we can give context, because it's always going to be more nuanced.
Should we get into community shoutouts for this week? Previous guest in the podcast who you heard a few episodes ago as well, Eloise Delois. She raced last week, Ironman 70.3 in Langkawi, right? She came on here to talk about her heat prep. How did her race go?
Yeah, she was racing in a pretty stacked field. Like Fenella Langridge was there, Regan Holyoke was there, a few others. Can't remember who won it, but point being, very stacked field. She had a pretty rough day, but she said she was not at all hot. So the heat prep obviously worked, but heat prep is a let's call it a 5%er, not a 1%, or maybe it's a 1%er. You still have to have a good day, have good legs, and she didn't. So she's now in off season, enjoying it. You're coming to London soon, mate. We went and bought a microwave for you to microwave some yogurt. So Eloise is going to come catch up with us, and it'll be the first time. It'll be the first time that we've. It will be the first time we've ever spent time as a triplet in person, despite working with each other for multiple years.
Looking forward to that. Not looking forward to staying with you and you documenting and exposing some of my other, what's the word I'm looking? Idiosyncrasies. Also, shout out by the way to Marden.
It's a choice, mate. You can stay elsewhere if you want. You can go pay for a hotel in London. See how you go doing that.
I wanted to give a shout out to Magda Nieuwvoet, a South African triathlete who was also in that race, in that Ironman 7.3. I think she was 7th overall, but she had raced Joburg 947, which is like a 94.7 kilometer cycle race in the pro field, and she had never done a pro cycling race before, the week before this race, and she was third overall, I think, second or third. But they're like quarter. Like Kim LaCourt's actually won the race and quarter right towards the end. So shout out to her, like multidisciplinarian and doing well all around. Also, Emily Donker raced Noosa Triathlon and was eighth in the elite field. And then New York Marathon took place last week. Do you have a couple of shout outs from there?
Yeah, so Jonah Rosner, a friend of the pod, or friend of mine, future pod guest when we decide eventually to lock him in and do this. So he did a bit of a workout, did a marathon workout in there, very classic sort of Canova stuff. He did 20 miles at marathon effort. It was 90% of marathon effort. And so, yeah, he ran 3:11. Given the course and what he was doing and the fact he slowed down, he's certainly on for a sub 3. He can easily knock that out of the park. And then I got a fun story. This Eaton Seagrave, he ran 2:39 there. It paced it perfectly. It was a 1 second negative split, which is really hard to do in New York, given the second half of the course is a little bit harder. I'd say.
Swiss?
So it's 9. No, he's not actually. He's Canadian, the loveliest Canadian guy. But the reason I bring this up, so I met Eaton and his wife sitting in the airport waiting to go to Berlin, I believe. I believe it's Berlin Marathon. He went for a shakeout run. He just come off a plane. I met them at the airport. I saw them and I was like, "Oh, you're a runner. Are you running?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm going to Berlin." And I chatted to his wife while he went for a shakeout run, and then ended up bumping into him, I think, after the race again, which was great. Really nice guy. Checked out how he went, whatever. And then I literally bumped into him after London. I was walking out of the London Marathon. I walked out. I was like, "Oh, Eaton, how you going?" So now, anyway, we were meant to run. I was meant to run New York, obviously. So he was looking forward to catching up there again. One of these people where they prove that all humans are more similar than they are different. We all think we're very unique, but we're all doing the same stuff. So, Eaton ran really well. Like 2:39 in New York's legit. So, congratulations there. And then another shout out to another friend of the podcast, probably a future guest as well, Victor Smungs. So I've been a guest on his podcast, Runners FM, a few times. So Victor has been running 10Ks and stepped up to the marathon. Was hoping to do well in Auckland. Did really well, but was leading at about 35K and then, calf and foot gave up. So wishing Victor a speedy recovery there. And then, he's going to get into some serious marathon prep soon. And I think Victor's going to run very fast in the marathon. He's more of a diesel. So good 10K time and he'll do that. So, yeah.
I wonder if he's the kind of guy that will tell people, "Yeah, I was leading the race," or if he's the kind of guy that will give his, he will say, "I had to pull out." Like I've got a friend like that who is like, "I was running at this pace, this incredible pace, up until 34Ks into the race," and then he doesn't tell people, "Yeah, you were sitting on a pavement after 34Ks, like on your butt, because you could not run, you could not finish the marathon anymore." So it's not called success, but I'm sure that doesn't apply to Victor. I'm just teasing him. And then the Corkwood 15K, we've got a couple of shout-outs from there as well. Lyle Rockman went sub 115. Darren Howe went 117. A couple of podcast listeners. They're also part of our Strava group, 1% Better Pod. And then Brendan Villanueva went 339 in a marathon at the Husky Running Festival. So shout out to everyone in this community. We are supported by Core Body Temperature Sensors. We're also discussing a paper on cooling later in the episode, which I'm very interested. You said to me, "Do you think listeners will find this interesting?" And I was like, "Hell yes, bring it on. I'm keen to hear more about this a little later on." But yeah, thank you to Core for being here. How's your heat block going?
Yeah, it's going well, man. But it's one of those things where you kind of know stuff, but then when you experience it, it's a bit different. The penny dropped for me in the last week. So I've been doing a ton of running on the treadmill. And when you come to see, you'll see by chance in the room that we have our treadmill in, the heater we can't turn it off. It's stuck, like the thing's broken. So it's like, it's on. And so it's hot in there and it's a small room. So it gets really warm and I overdress and it gets really hot and that's fine. When I pour sweat in there, and that's also okay. Like you're doing heat training, I don't really care. But the last 3 or 4 gym sessions I've been to, I've been pouring sweat, like just dripping everywhere. And I'm like, geez, it really turned the air conditioning on hot in here, the heating in the gym. And they do have heating in the gym, but no one else is sweating that much. I didn't realize it was like the heat training that's done it for me. Anyway, so went out for a run Sunday, ran 18 Ks. It was quite cool. Sort of 10 degrees Celsius, sort of 50 something Fahrenheit. All good. Wore a bit more than normal, quite a bit more than normal, thinking, oh, maybe a heat stimulus, maybe not. And ran really well. It was ran really fast. So obviously, the sort of performance aspect of this has come through, which is great. I averaged sort of 4:49 for 18 Ks with 150 meters of climbing. So I was pretty happy with that, given it was all pretty easy with a low heart rate. But it was pouring sweat and quite cold. And I was like, geez, this is really the heat training stuff really like coming through. And then yesterday on the treadmill, I ran for 40 minutes, was overdressed, was hot, whatever, drank 700 mils and was still down 1.7 liters. So for those
Oh.
like playing along at home, who don't play in metric, 700 milliliters weighs about 700 grams. And, I was down 1.7 kilos. So that's, 1,700 grams. Yeah. So anyway, point being, I sweat quite a lot in 40 minutes, which is wild to think about. So the heat training is really coming through. Both the positive adaptations, the performance, that sort of stuff, as well as some of the downsides or potential risks, as Lindsay Hunt talked about last week, which is like the potential for you to be sweating a lot and really have to replace that.
Do you make a concerted effort to replenish the rest of the day if you sweat that much?
Yeah, yep. Got a water bottle and just pour it, like just force myself to put it back in. I try and do it a little bit more conservatively than Lindsay suggests, not because I disagree with his way, just because I find that I don't want to get up and pee that often. So I tend to like push probably a liter pretty quickly, and then I'll try and keep drinking the rest of the day as well. And then I find that if I'm not careful, I'll end up getting up to pee in the night, and I prefer to not do that. So I try to cut myself off from drinking too much after about 5 p.m. because I'm in bed by about 8 p.m. So, yeah.
Cool. Let's move on and have a look at what's come across my desk. I don't want to talk about this first one. Oh, you put the Women's Cricket World Cup final in here. I don't want to talk about it, man. Oh, you can tell listeners
Such a
why I don't want to
chauvinist,
talk
mate.
about it.
Because you're a chauvinist.
That's
you hate
not it.
women's
That's
sport.
definitely not it. That's definitely not it. Oh,
I
it's so
texted
painful
you
to watch. Oh, we lost.
I texted you during so the India were batting, and I texted you during this, and I said South Africa are working on dropping the World Cup again. And for context, for those who don't know cricket, or certainly don't have history for this, in 1999, Herschel Gibbs dropped a catch in the Cricket World Cup final against Australia, but I don't remember who was batting. But the person said to him, "You just dropped the World Cup, mate." And that turned out to be true. And it, as my father used to say to me when I was a kid, like drop catches lose matches, man. So yeah, it was interesting. It was a good game though. It was fun to watch. I enjoyed it a lot. Quality cricket was really good. I haven't watched a lot
Really
of women's
good.
cricket recently.
Yes. Yeah.
It was really
So
good
good.
cricket to watch. And the interesting thing I found was that everybody was wearing a whoop. Both teams, all of them were wearing a whoop. That was really interesting to see. Particularly because cricket's not a sport. I mean, there was a South African cricketer who got cut maybe 2 years ago for being out of shape. So this thought of like being physically active and physical performance is pretty new to cricket. It's not there's a lot of teams and famous players. Arjuna Rantunga comes to mind. The Sri Lankan captain was very out of shape. So it's pretty new there. It was also like cool to see some of the advanced analytics. So you could get onto this website and look at the advanced analytics for the batsman. Like, hey, bats really well at doing this, or facing this type of bowler, they do this. So I think it's cool that we're seeing those advanced analytics in sport, in any sport of any type. So I love it. I'm a sports scientist. Bring it on, more data. I love it.
Did I tell you that Marizanne Kapp, who is the all-rounder, also wearing a whoop there? Did I tell you she's my neighbor? She lives next door.
You didn't. You did not. So
Yeah,
that was very
probably best
interesting.
all-rounder in the world now. Very, very, very competitive. I don't know if you saw when one of the fielders dropped a catch on her bowling, the death stare she gave her teammate. Wow, I've never seen anything like it. But yeah, it just talks about it, shows what a fierce competitor she is. And then shout out to our captain, South African captain, Lara Wolfhard. Unbelievable batting, scoring 100 in both the semi-final and the final. Really wanted that World Cup for her. But yeah, the level of women's cricket, I just love. We're going to go on a tangent here. I have a family member who about 3-4 years ago said to me, this is an old school person who was like, sorry, aesthetically, I can't watch. He loves cricket so much, but he's like, women's cricket, aesthetically, I just can't watch this, blah, blah, blah. But a very conservative person, conservative in their views. This World Cup, they were watching with me. They were like so into it. And it just speaks, I think, to first exposure to something that you were told is something else, possibly. The more you learn, the more you watch, and then the more that sport grows as well, the more you get into it. So yeah, all round really successful.
having watched a lot of women's sport from across a spectrum, when I mean that is sports that are just starting out, where women are just starting to play at a high level through to elite, right? So when we're talking at the top end, you're talking about golf, you're talking about tennis, where it's not women's tennis anymore. It's just tennis and women play it, right? Like we don't talk about women's tennis as women's sport. It's just like, it's just tennis. So if we use the spectrum and go like new professional sport, say call it cricket 7-8 years ago, new for women to play professionally at a high level on TV compared to tennis even 15-20 years ago, which was already at a high level, right? Where we end up is this is not the same product. It is a product of the same quality, but it looks different. And that's really important. They play it a different way. And that's, many people say they prefer the women's tennis game because there's less power and therefore it's more skill related, right? I'm not going to pick sides on this, but what I'm saying is the women don't play like the men, and that's okay. They don't have to. And it shouldn't be about, we want to do that. It should be, we want to be at the top level and performing at a high level, and we will do that in our way and we'll find different solutions, which is great, right? Women's rugby sevens, similarly. The challenge you have, particularly with people who are very conservative to start with, is when the product isn't quite there yet. It's very hard. When they're seeing things like, stuff that you would say would be at a low level for men in terms of mistakes that are made or something like dropping easy catches. And I'm not talking about the South Africans dropping catches here. Like that's pressure. That's what happens. But I'm talking about like regular dropped catches, double bounce balls or something like this, too many full tosses, like stuff like that where you're like, oh, like this is really amateur. That's where you'll really lose people. And I've said this a lot, is the problem with it is, particularly in the early stages, you won't necessarily see the same highlights. The highlights will be good, but they're not going to be quite as good as the men's because of whatever. But it's the low lights that will get people to turn off. So people are not going to turn on for those highlights, and the low lights will turn people off. So it takes time for the sport to develop to a stage where those things are no longer there. So the bandwidth probably raises completely and certainly narrows. The floor comes up. And I think that's really helpful at that point. Certainly women's cricket's there, and it doesn't take long. We're talking probably, 2 World Cup cycles from very amateur to very professional now.
Yeah.
And then you also have to make concessions in some respects. And there's a lot of discussion in rugby around the size of the ball for women because of their hand size. And should we make a smaller ball so we can see improved handling? And you certainly think, when you're thinking about it from a cricket perspective, you're thinking about bat weight. Now, bat weight is something that the batters choose. So that's their own decision to make. Talking about ball weight. So do they play with the same size ball? And, for context, teenagers play with a smaller ball, right? A different weight ball. I can't remember exactly the weight. I think it's a 152 and a 178 or something, or 156 to 178. So maybe they play with a ball that's a little bit smaller, a little bit less heavy, because then they can bowl it faster, hit it further. And then the third aspect is, and where are the boundaries? Because you want to see a roughly similar number of sixes, because that way, which is kind of like a home run for the American listeners, because that way we end up with a roughly proportionate scoring and roughly proportionate difficulties and that sort of stuff. So it changes the game. But if you have a smaller field, then it's easier to field in because you have a set number of fielders. So you end up with a slightly different game because you're applying different constraints.
So interesting, man. Thanks for giving that language. That was not planned. That was just what we did off the cuff now. But that's exactly what I was thinking. And you're always so eloquent in giving it language and explaining it. But yeah, well done to the ICC. A great Women's Cricket World Cup. Should we move on to what I was talking about earlier? We've been talking about heat adaptation a lot. But what about cooling? Like, are there benefits to cooling?
So the answer is yes. Unashamedly, yes, there are benefits of cooling. The question is, like, what are you cooling and how do you get it done and where? So if you remember with the Jamie Stanley episode way back when, I can't exactly remember when we signposted back to it. Last week, if you go listen to the podcast, I signposted exactly back to when it was. But
like way back in March, I think.
Of like
last year.
More like, I think it was like a year ago, man. It was like November last year. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, he talked about some cooling strategies, things like ice slushies, pre-cooling, so using ice vests ahead of time. Those sort of things are there. But this review, ironically, one of the authors of this review is a student of mine. I taught this guy when he was an undergraduate, David
Lipman?
Borg. So
sorry.
No, Borg. I taught David when he was a student. Now he's a professor. So it's really cool. It makes me feel old, but it's really cool.
Just quickly, did you not catch my joke there now? It was a lame joke, but you just glossed over it. You went like David, and I went Lipman, and you're like, no, Bjorg.
Yeah, well, I didn't teach myself, mate. Like, he wasn't like that. Wasn't a student. It doesn't make any sense.
Sorry. Move on. I'm embarrassed. Let's move on. I might cut this part out.
I
don't like looking back.
I was trying to cover it up, mate. I was trying to cover it up, and you're like, no, did you get it? Because when you explain a joke, it's not funny. But when you explain a joke that isn't a joke, it's even less funny, mate. I was trying to help you. Anyway, so this paper was called Head, Neck, and Face Cooling for Performance, a Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis, which is basically these authors, they grabbed all the research they could looking at cooling of the head, neck, and face to see if that affected performance, basically. That's what they're looking at. Largely, this is inconclusive, which I could have guessed ahead of time. So what they said, crucially though, is they found no evidence of harmful performance effects. Cooling the head, neck, and face reduced the skin temperature at the target site and improved thermal sensation and comfort. I will get into what the negative effects may be because it's actually quite interesting. But what they're saying here is we didn't see any negative effects. And if you put cool stuff on the head, neck, and face, it cools the local area and you feel cooler, which is really important, particularly in the head, is what I would say. There was no effect on heart rate, and effects on core temperature and mean skin temperature were so small they could be considered physiologically negligible, which is basically saying if we affected core temperature at all, it wasn't meaningful, right? And it's quite hard to affect core temperature when you're applying something to the outside that is not a very big surface area. If you think about the full surface area of your head, neck, and face, it's not very much compared to, say, an ice vest, which is significant. Now, you wouldn't race with an ice vest because, yeah, it's a bit too much. But we did talk about people using ice at Western States in their packs, right? Adverse events associated with the interventions were rare, and there was no report of any cooling strategy making a participant feel cooler and then pushing beyond their thermal limits, causing exertional heat illness. And this is important. What they basically said here is there is almost no downside we can see. There seems to be some perception benefits and maybe some physiology. We don't really think so, though. The negative effects and so it's probably worthwhile doing this is the point if you can do it. The negative effects they may see, it's quite interesting. There is a reflex that babies have called the diving reflex, where if you cool a forehead, they will drop their heart rate, their metabolic rate goes down, right? And this is to allow them to come through the birth canal. So when they're coming through the birth canal, they get a cold sensation on their forehead if they come through the correct way, and sometimes they don't, and that's its own challenge. We're not going to get this is not an obstetrics lecture, but you want them to have a lowered heart rate as a result of that. And the diving reflex is somewhat maintained in people to different degrees. So I did research. We were in my university studies. We actually did a bit of a project on this where you put your face in cold water and it would drop your heart rate and drop all those sort of things. And that's actually the opposite of what you want when you're training, right? Or when you're exercising. You don't want to drop your heart rate because you need the heart rate to keep going. So you don't want to send the wrong signal. So they're saying here that they didn't see any of that, which is important. So the take home here is I would definitely be doing some of this cooling if I could and I needed to in a hot race. I think there's a lot more benefit in probably cooling the hands, which they didn't look at. And that would be established by some other research there. But I thought it was a cool paper to sort of look at and think about how we could do that. Now, the one thing you need to remember is whenever we're using water, I'm going to talk about this with Kipchoge later, or in a second. When we're using water only helps cool us, or it can help us cool us in two ways. Firstly, water conducts heat better than air does. So it will sort of draw some heat. But once it's there and it's drawn that heat, which is not very long, it needs to evaporate to really help us, right? And that's why sweating helps. Now, things that you're only going to evaporate, either water or sweat, if it's not that humid. If it's humid, it's 90% humidity, that's just going to sit there and it's going to make it worse, not better.
Yeah. That is so interesting. I've done that in my Ironmans actually, where instead of just pouring water over you, I've grabbed ice at the aid stations and then ran with the ice in my hand, holding it in my hand. And it does make a difference. I think we spoke about that like in one of the first episodes when we started this podcast, if memory serves me correctly.
We did. I know it's a strategy that Matthew Marquardt uses as well.
Yeah. Very cool. You mentioned Kipchoge there. He ran New York Marathon last week, and before that announced that it is his last competitive race. Man, we're going to miss the GOAT, or are we going to miss him?
Depends, man. Depends on how much you are going to... Like, the question is, like, how much of an influence has he really had in the last handful of races? Like, he's done a bunch of pre-race media, which is great. It's good for the sport. He's out there and people get to see him. Great, good for the sport. But, like, I don't know if he was competitive in this marathon.
No, he wasn't. Really honest, what I'm alluding to, he's not going away. He's not going to be out of our consciousness. He's still around and going to be doing some cool stuff. You calling him an influencer? He's entering his influencer phase.
Is he not? Is this not what this is? Like, he wore a thing from Nike that was built for trail running. on the coolest day with the best weather, on the coolest day with the best weather in New York has had for ages, the women's record went down. That has stood for over 20 years, and this guy wore a cooling top. Why? Because Nike paid him to.
Yeah.
Like, that's okay. It's not a problem. It's just like, that's the reality of the situation. He didn't need this top. We'll talk about that top a bit more in a second. But, he's going
I
to
just
go
had an
do
idea. I'm just going to jot it down here. You wore a version of that top. I'm going to put a photo of you and him side by side on our Instagram page and be like, who wore it better? Yes, great idea.
Kipchoge wore it better. There's no question Kipchoge wore it better. I'll be really disappointed if people vote for me. I'm nowhere near as cool as Drip Chogi. That photo shoot he did a couple of years ago with all that drip, Drip Chogi.
So cool.
I'm not even anywhere near that. But he's now doing a marathon on each continent for the next 2 years, 7 marathons, 7 continents over 2 years to spread the good word of running. He's talked about all sorts of stuff like spreading world peace and I don't know. It was a bit much for me, man. But anyway, the point is he's going to go do this. It's cool. He'll go run stuff in Saudi Arabia or whatever. He's taking money now, man. And good on him. And hopefully he uses some of this money to improve the village and improve the lives of people in Kenya. And he's earned it. He's done a bunch for running and all that. So he's on huge take from Abbott. He's just selling his training app now. You can train with his similar methods, which someone's obviously paid him for. I don't think he's got much input there. He got paid to wear this top. So we got a question about the top. It was developed for Western states by Nike. The goal is it's got these big holes to sort of create airflow and allow that. And again, we talked about me trying one on Chamonix. I could send you that photo. I could kind of feel it. I could be convinced by it. Again, it depends. I think at speeds closer to what he runs at, that probably makes more sense because he's moving faster. So airflow is more. That's the first thing to remember there. It also doesn't really hold a lot of water, which again, on a humid day might be helpful. On a non-humid day, maybe having some water there might be more helpful. I don't really know. I could be convinced this thing works. I'm not 100% convinced it works. How's that?
Well, let's see how long it sticks around for. You brought some interesting points to it when they released it at Western States too. Seems to be hanging around. Let's see if it's still around next year this time. Let's move on.
Let's put it this way. I would say this. Let's see if another Roadrunner does it. Let's see if other Roadrunners start doing it. It's usually success leaves clues, man. If other Nike athletes start choosing to wear this thing, then because it also looks a bit funny, I'll be really clear. And that is a reason that some athletes will decide not to wear it. But if other athletes start trying to wear it or start wearing it, then we know, hey, there might be something here. Otherwise, if Conor Mance turns up in it or something like that, then you go, oh, maybe there's something here. Until that point, if it's just the top dog, they're getting paid. And that's okay. Again, also okay for them to get paid, also fine to wear. But yeah, I'm not so sure that I believe in the marketing if only one person's wearing it. If the others are not choosing to wear it, then yeah. And don't kid yourself. If a Nike-sponsored athlete reached out to Nike and said, I would really like one of these, is it possible? They would say yes.
Yeah, of course. Should we move on? We shouldn't be surprised by this next news, but you found an article about weight loss drugs being banned for the LA Olympics. This is going to be, I think, a really interesting discussion.
Yeah, so I don't know if we've talked about this on the podcast before. It's hard. I usually remember this stuff, and I don't remember if we talked about this. So apologies if we've talked about them before. We'll be pretty brief. I don't think we have. The article is in the... Okay, the article's in the show notes. You're not good at this. You never remember what I say anyway. There's an article here in the show notes for people to go listen. I think it's from The Guardian to go read. I did a talk on this for Athletics Australia coaches last week, thanks to a previous guest, Nikolai Morris, who actually got me involved to do that. And so, in short, I'll review at a high level here. So, in short, people are probably thinking of these weight loss drugs as Ozempic predominantly. They're a class of drugs that affect various receptors in the body, and we're not going to go into the physiology of it. But Ozempic and Wegovy are the brand names for semaglutide or semaglutide, however you want to pronounce that. And these work on the GLP-1 receptors. They're called GLP-1s, GLP-1 receptor agonists, whatever you want to call them. Then there is a second sort of generation. It's not right to say generation of these, but sort of second type of these. Brand names of Mounjaro or Zepbound, and these are brand names for tirzepatide. It's a drug that has both GLP-1 receptor agonism as well as GIP, so it affects two different intestinal peptides, basically. There is now a retatrutide, which has come to the market, which is a third target, which then has glucagon as well. So generally in medicine, if we target a certain receptor, we'll get benefits at a low dose or at a dose, and then we can have more benefits by titrating up. But as we titrate up, we can get more side effects. It's generally how that happens. So often what people will do is instead of titrating up a dose, let's add a second or third thing to try and create synergistic effects, which is what's happened here, right? So these all will affect appetite and therefore affect basically weight loss. Now, they're also made for diabetes and they have all sorts of influences on glucose output from the liver and insulin and all that stuff, but we don't need to go there. We're talking about in people who are in an athletic field, so they're probably not going to have diabetes unless they're riding for Team Novo Nordisk, and in that case, these are probably not as relevant anyway. So one of the side effects of weight loss is always going to be muscle loss. It's always going to happen. When you lose weight, you're going to lose muscle. Now, how much muscle depends on your protein intake and your strength training and all those sort of things. But it's a known, and again, side effects are not... when we have a drug and it does something, we call it an effect. And when it does something we don't want to do, we call it a side effect. They're all just effects, right? So in this context, what I'm getting at here is like this, athletes could probably be using this. And, here's the cliff notes. This has been on the monitored list. These have been on the monitored list since 2024. And I think we talked about that at the time. And again, the criteria for this is to be on the banned substance list is 2 of the 3 need to be met. It enhances performance or has the potential to enhance performance. Its use has an actual or potential health risk for the athlete, and it is against the spirit of the sport. Now, these are notably vague and grey, and intentionally so, I think.
Yeah.
I could argue...
What is against the spirit of the sport? I mean...
Exactly. I could argue in a court of law for and against each of these criteria for these drugs. Which is to say, I could argue 3 of 3 of these apply, 2 or 3 of these apply, or they don't apply, whatever. So the fact these are not banned at the moment and they're on the monitored list says to me one thing, that the WADA is not convinced that these people are going to be using them, which I think is ridiculous because I am convinced that people would be using them. I wrote an article on in my newsletter about this, like these are going to be used. So they're monitoring it, and this article basically says they're probably going to be banned by the time that LA rolls around because enough people are using it. It's kind of what it boils down to. Now, what's more interesting is on the horizon, to combat these side effects, there is another one of these drugs coming out with a 4th target, and the 4th target is myostatin. And those who know much about physiology will know what myostatin does. Myostatin is what stops muscle growth. So if you have a myostatin inhibitor, you have sort of this ridiculous muscle growth. Now, if you look up myostatin, myostatin, inhibitor or inhibited cow, you will see these things that look like a CGI AI. These things they make Arnold Schwarzenegger look like a skinny little runt. So myostatin basically allows, if you block it, will allow free muscle growth, a lot of muscle growth. And the goal of having myostatin inhibitors added into these drug medications, whatever you want to call them, is that you will then prevent some of the muscle loss. As soon as we add myostatin to these things will be banned in a heartbeat. Because that is a different, all of a sudden, there's no such thing as a physiological free lunch, but geez, you have a lot of the side effects really limited for athletes. Now, athletes are going to lose mass and maintain muscle, and it's just all of a sudden, you almost have to ban these things or let everybody use them, and it's like a problem in itself. So,
is there a way for the anti-doping agencies to test for these to see whether athletes are using them?
Yeah, so the way these work, they target a receptor, right? So they're agonists of receptors. So they will go to the target and they will target that receptor foreseeably. And again, I don't work in anti-doping. I've never done that. I understand physiology, maybe not as well as I need to. But the point being, you could probably create an antibody that would attach these and flag them so you would be able to see that. So they're already on the monitored list. And if they're on the monitored list, it means that they are being tracked. So my guess is here, yes. The question is, can they be engineered another way so they can avert that test? And the answer to that is probably yes. I don't know it to be the fact. I don't know anybody who's doing anything like that. But again, their human will to win and cheat knows no bounds. So I would not be surprised if you could sort of maneuver your way around this.
Well said. Very well said. Okay, we got a bunch of things to get through in this episode, so let's rattle through the next few things. There's a lot of increasingly loud discourse around an aligned calendar for World Rugby. Are you for this? Are you against this? What's been happening in this news?
Yeah, I mean, things are messy at the moment. There's lots of discussions here. And the good thing is all the world's best coaches agree on this. The real question is, what does rugby union, and again, we had an episode about rugby union versus rugby league with Mike Wood previously. I encourage people to go listen to that. And he made the point that rugby union is an event It is about the international game. It is about like single day events. And if we want rugby to be that and to continue to be that, then we need to prioritize the international game, right? And that means that you have to sacrifice the club game to some degree, right? And that the country needs to be put in priority. Now, the problem is majority of player salaries are paid by the clubs, right? But if we think about the only other real corollary we can use here is international football, as in soccer. The problem with that is you can play 3 games a week in soccer or football. You cannot do that in rugby because of the nature of the sport, right? So you have this, these real challenges. And the new World Rugby sort of, I don't know what it's called, but they've just put out a statement around player load limits. So they're maximizing 30 full games or 34 matches a year per season, a maximum of 6 weeks consecutive matches, a minimum off-season break of 5 weeks, rest after an international duty of at least 1 week, an annual non-contact time of 12 weeks, which means they're not allowed to do contact training in that time. So when you look at this, now we go, okay, we've got to fit this, and we're trying to align the northern and southern hemispheres, which is the real problem, is a lack of alignment between the north and southern hemisphere. And that's seasonal, let's be honest. Rugby's historically been a winter game, so it makes sense that these seasons are not aligned, but we kind of just need to get past that. That's the reality. So the best thing, I think, is to move the southern hemisphere to align with the north and have a true international windows that are blocked off. Now, the reason I say that is because the Six Nations is the most powerful organization in the sport, and English rugby is the most powerful organization within that. So you're not going to get them to budge towards the southern hemisphere. That ain't happening. Good luck. There's also more TV money in the north than there is in the south. That is what it is. There are teams choosing to play in the UK to make more money off their games. Springboks choose to come here because they make more money from it.
So I saw Springboks in Japan playing at Wembley.
Exactly. So given all that and being a realist, the south has to cave to the north. Sorry, that is what it is. The other thing to remember here is that, so over the weekend it was an international window, but there was no games played in the English club games. England played Australia, and they prevented 2 of the Australians playing. Their club said you're not allowed to play for the Australian team. And they sat in the stands and watched.
Wow.
Because England was so worried about these 2 players. So we can't have that. Like, I understand why it happened, but it's garbage, and that's not the best thing for the international game, right?
That should not be allowed.
So
should not be allowed.
But it is allowed at the moment because these international windows are not properly done. And Regulation 9 is what is the law or the rule here, the regulation that applies. And it basically says they can't be prevented from playing for their countries, but there's always wiggle room here. Now, if they're outside these, they kind of have these windows at the moment. So if you're outside of that, then yeah, they can kind of prevent you. There's also a bunch of players who play for like 2nd or 3rd tier nations like Samoa, and the clubs go play, but if you get injured, you don't have a contract anymore. So we really need to shore this up. So currently the top tier nations, they play 10 to 13 matches a year internationally. So if I was put in charge for a day, if I was staff for a day, I'd do 2 blocks of 5 weeks for these guys. They go, you got two blocks of 5 weeks to play, and then have another 3-week window. And I'd encourage the top tier nations to play the 2nd tier nations or 3rd tier nations, because these 2nd and 3rd tier nations keep saying, we need more good quality games. We need them. Cool. There are 3 weeks here. You play in these 3-week blocks against them, and all play against our A sides, our 2nd tier sides, right, during these international windows. I think we just have to do that, more of that. You double head up, same day, same place, go for it. I think that makes sense there. Then you have 2 weeks off as a result of this, 1 after each block. So that's 12 weeks, right? So we have 10 weeks of playing plus a week either side of it. That gives us 20 games for the clubs, which could be across at least 23 weeks. And then that gives us 35 weeks total of the year. Still have a bunch. We have 5 weeks off that are mandatory. So we're at 40 weeks. So we still have 12 weeks to spare, which could be used for matches. And you're going to need a bigger squad because you can't expect everyone to play uninjured the whole time. And an injury means people are not doing contact and these sort of things. So a lot of this will work itself out and shake itself out. But you'd also need another 7 weeks of non-contact in there, right? Mixed across it. And you could do that in a season. You could have a week off contact or whatever. So that's how I would try and do this. But yeah, it's messy and it's difficult. And there are smarter people than me that haven't organized this. And I think that's more to do with ego than it is to do with anything else.
You should send this to them with great suggestions, but don't just send it in an email. Chop up this segment of the podcast so they can also see the podcast and send it to them. I think it's great suggestions. Makes sense to me.
Well, you're You're the one who chops the podcast, mate. So you chop it and we can send it. I mean, there's a good rugby podcast called Rugby Unity with an Australian journalist and then two great coaches, Eddie Jones and Ewan McKenzie. They talk about this a bit. So you can certainly tag them in it as well. They'd be interested to hear it.
Let's get to the paper that we mentioned earlier about durability, where they were using stride. This paper was called Durability of Physiological and Biomechanical Variables During a Marathon. What did we find here?
Yeah. So durability is hard to characterize, is the first thing I'd say. But for the most part, the way we think about it is a decoupling of internal and external load, which is to say you'll see what they call aerobic decoupling in training peaks, which your heart rate will go up for the same pace, or at the same heart rate, your pace goes down, or pace goes down and heart rate goes up. It's a real bad day. So what they did here was they got runners who are using stride and asked them to donate data, which gets messy and gets difficult because people say they will and they don't, or they upload the wrong thing. Anyway, they ended up with 69 runners, which is a pretty good number. Only 4 females, unfortunately, but so be it. People on average were 44 years old, plus or minus 10 and a half years. They were 178 centimeters, plus or minus what looks to be 8 centimeters. They were 73 kilos, plus or minus 10 kilos, which is a huge variance. And they had a running experience of 12 plus or minus 9.6 years. So, I mean, again, also wild, like basically 3 to 20 years experience. But they completed the participants completed the marathon in a median finish time of 3:42 with an interquartile range, which means the middle 50% were an hour either side of that. So 2:42 to 4:42. Basically, they used the heart rate. Unfortunately, some of these were using the smartwatch's optical heart rate sensor, which is just trash. It's not worth it. I won't get into why. If people are interested, DM me. I'll send you an article on it. The external work rate was determined using a grade adjusted speed or grade adjusted pace. And then they used this with a ratio to heart rate for each 5K segment as well. So we'll talk about this. So they use the 5K segments and they excluded the first 5Ks because it's messy. Everyone's been in the first part of a marathon. It's a mess. And they left the last 2.5K or the last 2.2 kilometers out, right? So 5Ks is 3 miles. They cut the first 3 miles and they left the last, I don't know what miles that is. It'd be 2.2Ks is 1.25. Yeah, it's like 1.5 miles almost. It's not quite. Anyway, so they compared the decoupling of the heart rate and the speed. Again, remembering durability is about decoupling these things. So they decoupled the last segment, 35 to 40 kilometers, expressed relative to the first segment. So what was the ratio here? So if you had a decoupling of less than 1.1 in the last segment, you were classified as low decoupling, and then it was 1.1 to 1.2, and then more than 1.2. And the more than 1.2 was high decoupling. So how much did these diverge? The onset of decoupling was calculated by indexing the distance at which the decoupling exceeded and remained above 2.5%. So once you decoupled more than 2.5% and that was maintained, that was considered the onset of decoupling, right? A similar approach is used to identify when biomechanical changes began in each parameter, right? So they used strides metrics to look at all these different parameters, stride rate and stride length and lower leg stiffness and all these things. Or leg spring stiffness, ground contact time, etc. And they looked at all of this stuff. Again, they used 2.5% degradation in these metrics to look at when this happened. What was interesting here is this is what they found. Our findings suggest that runners with a lower decoupling, so they had better durability, tended to preserve their fresh gait mechanics more effectively than those with higher decoupling. So their gait looked more similar throughout the marathon than those who had high decoupling. So that's kind of what we would have anticipated.
So that is fewer biomechanical changes, basically.
Yes, if you're more durable. But if you look at these, many of the biomechanical changes varied proportionately with speed, which would also make sense, right? That's saying that they would reflect slowing more than independent changes. So more durable runners actually had, when you normalize for speed, they actually had a changing in strategy. So their gait parameters changed, but to maintain the same speed. Whereas the other people's didn't change and they lost speed, which is actually the goal here. So this is really about how you think about this, which is my goal to maintain speed or is it to maintain my gait parameters? And the answer is speed. Like the goal of the marathon is not to look the best, it's to finish the fastest. So in this context, it's quite interesting that a more durable runner seems to have like my read on this is they have a different strategy to achieve speed, or different ways as they fatigue to maintain their speed and not decouple. So they
But
have
they're
ways
not
of
doing this
basically improving
intentionally,
their
right? It's
efficiency.
coming naturally. They're not doing it intentionally.
Yes. I mean, no one thinks about how they run for the most part. And if you do, you're probably wasting energy. So no one's thinking about, I'm running and I need to run faster, right? So they are, yes, it is intentional that I need to hold this pace, but it's not intentional to go, oh, to hold this pace, I have to chop my stride length and then have a slightly stiffer leg and do this. Like, they're not thinking that stuff. They're just going, I need to run faster.
Yeah.
And this is what, when you look at skill coaching and that sort of stuff, they start talking about self-organization and the body as a problem solver. And this is where, like, a lot of what I've done in my life, and I love it. So you give the body a problem to solve and it will find a solution to it. And you try and, impose constraints, it will find different solutions. So the constraint of fatigue creates a different set of a different potential solution to the same problem of maintaining speed, which is you have to change your gait parameters, right? So it's quite interesting. I found this to be a really interesting paper, and I really liked. I actually shared it with the Stride guys, and they'd seen it already, unsurprisingly. There's some cool graphs here that probably don't mean a lot, so it's probably not worth including them for social, but they are interesting to look at different changes here.
Thanks. You promised that would be interesting. It is very interesting. We've talked also before on this podcast on how you become more durable and that, and it's something we'll revisit in the future as well. So again, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Should we have a look at New York Marathon quickly? I actually forgot. I was so busy with traveling last week. I forgot that it was happening, and then you texted me, and I turned it on, and it was right at the end of the men's finish, which was kind of hilarious. But let's have a look at what went on at New York Marathon.
So firstly, it was a perfect day for running. Everybody said it, and you could see it in the times as well. Secondly, the bibs were way too big. I have friends around this. I saw these bibs. They were huge, particularly on runners. These are not rugby players. They're tiny people. These bibs were enormous. That's my first bit. I couldn't get the British stream for this for whatever reason. I had the French stream. It was good for my French, but they had ad blocks that were so long, man. I couldn't, like, this made Iron Man's footage look like it had no ads in it. It was wild. But anyway, it is cool. And I mentioned this last year, and I'll mention every year. The app had the live streams of both men's and women's race consistently in it. You just get in the app and watch it. There's no commentary, but it's great. You can just see it, which is really, really cool. Yeah, it's unreal. So you can, if they're showing the men's stream on TV, you can quickly flick to the women's on your phone and vice versa. So I really liked it. I just wanted to... couple of predictions updates, because I make these predictions. I assume people want to hear how I went on them. This is not to gloat, but I called, not publicly, but in a DM message with you and our CMO, Spencer Ladderback, I called Bekele to DNF, and he did. I called on the podcast Kipchoge to alpha the group and then be off the back at the Queensborough Bridge, and that's exactly what happened. We'll talk about that again a bit more later. And then there's some big high-level stories for the day. Surprises in fourth place. Both men's and women's races were quite surprising in fourth place. The debutantes, people who debuted, had an absolute day, and not a great day for Nike. Huge day for others, especially Addy. Addy had 4 of the top 6 finishes, or 4 of the podium places. Wow, Under Armour and On had the other ones. So, yeah. So I mean, it's a Nike race.
On had the winner.
So Nike
on had the winner in the women's field. They don't care.
Yep. And Addy had the 3rd place in the women's field, but the Adidas had the whole men's podium. So that's, take what you want from that. So interestingly, in the men's race, Bohr broke things up over the bridge. This happens every year. If I was coaching somebody to try and win this race, I'd be like, there's going to be a move on the Queensborough Bridge. Be ready for it. It's a long bridge. There's no crowds. It's uphill. So it was interesting to watch him, though, because he clearly made a surge on the bridge and then slowed up as he came off the bridge. Because what it created was it created all these groups, and he had this chase group that sort of caught up with him. So he dropped back into that what was the initial, in cycling would be called chase 1, became the peloton again. And then there was the, or maybe it's the peloton and whatever else. But point being, he sort of had this chase group that caught him up. At 37 Ks, there were 4 left. And I'm looking at this group and I'm like, who is this Diva guy or Deva from England? I'm like, who is this guy? Why is he here? And then, I mean, on the finish line, we had a sprint finish that rivaled the world champs. 0.3 of a second. Benson Kipruto beats his training partner, Alexander Matiso. Kipruto's like celebrating early and almost loses it. It was wild, man. I could not believe this. I was like, what are we doing here? That was crazy. Korea ended up coming in 3rd. And then Diva, as we said, he's on debut in the marathon. He's run a 60-11 half. So obviously very talented, trains with the Puma squad, Alistair Craig and stuff in the US. So he's obviously ready for the race, but I don't think anybody picked this. And then other interesting things, Joel Reichow ran 209.56 for a PR for 6th and first American. So he'd run 210.37 in 2023 in Chicago for his PR, and he was 18th last year in New York, running 212.52. This guy's still got like 1,000 and something Instagram followers. I think it was 1,000 when I first looked him up, and now it's probably 1,500, but like still a very small deal in US running, which I think is kind of cool. Charles Hicks came 7th, just behind him, 3 seconds behind him, 209.59. He's only 24 years old, again, on debut. But interestingly, if you look at his World Athletics profile, it says, his World Athletics profile says, Great Britain until 18th of June, 2025, eligible to represent the USA in national and representative competitions, sealed World Athletics eligibility to represent member rule 4.4.2 from 14th of July, 2026. So really interesting. So from mid next year, he'll be American. Until that point, he's technically he was British until earlier this year. So he's kind of nothing at the moment. But yeah, I think he considers himself American. Sondre Moen got 8th. Joe Klecker, another debutant, paced it perfectly and apparently had quite a bit left. He debuted for 10th, and this was, I think he split evenly through halfway. If you look at his pacing, it's like metronomic. He apparently hit 175 grams of carbs per hour. So that'll be interesting to see what we see from Joe going forward. Yeah, interesting to see it. And then just to round out, so completeness here, Kipchoge 17th in 2:14.36. Looked to be jogging for part of this. I don't know if that's because he couldn't run faster or if because he was just like, I'm out of it now, I'm done, I'll jog it in. Abdi Nagy, last year's winner, was a DNF. So he broke his streak of coming second or third on every race by winning last year, and now he DNF'd. So in the women's race. Yeah, we had this is part of the biannual Lucchetti versus Obiri festival. They race twice a year, and everyone else is just a spectator. Chip Karui was like making a lot of the pace early, but ultimately she was just run off. Like in the last couple of miles, she was run out of it and came third. The previous course record was 2003. It was 2:22.31. The new record from Helen Obiri now is 2:19.51. So a huge chunk off it. She took off with 800 meters to go and gapped Lucchetti, which was interesting because he saw the opposite in Boston this year. The top 3 were all under the previous course record. So it speaks to how fast a day it was and having people to race, right? So we're talking about men and trying to break 2 hours and this sort of stuff. Like part of it's also just having someone to race, I think, is a huge part of it. Again, we talked about the 4th. Fiona O'Keefe, the American, had a huge result here. She came 4th. She won the Olympic trials for them on debut and was a DNF at the games. But her PR was 2:22.10 from the trials, and she ran 2:22.49. So very close to that. So she's obviously got a big future in the marathon. Frisbee came 5th and she ran a PR of 2:24.12. She beat Safan Hassan very late. Safan ran 2:24.43. Remembering Safan ran Sydney 8 weeks ago. So it was interesting. I mean, on reflection at the end, it makes sense, but during the race, if you watched it, Safan would kind of fall off the back and then come back onto it. But she has a history of doing this. Even in like London and that sort of stuff, she would fall off the back, come back. And I was just thinking, what would you be thinking as somebody in that group? She's falling off the back, coming back. She's falling off the back, coming back. It's like kind of like this. It's like the Terminator. Like she just keeps coming back. And you're like, hey, she's here again. What are we doing? But it's hard to understand if she's running consistent and the group is surging and then coming back to her, or if she's dropping off and then surging back to the group. It's hard to understand those dynamics. It's also hard to understand if she's fatigued or not. Like, can she just not go with them, but she can keep going at the same pace, in which case you're kind of worried. Or if she's just fatigued and falling off and then having to really work to get back on, then you're not so worried. So it's hard to know. And also, like, Safan's got a good pedigree. She's won marathons, and she's fast late. So you'd be worried if you were there. Even someone like Helen Obiri with such a good track pedigree, like Safan's probably faster than her over the last mile. If she's got the like sort of running left in her legs, if she's durable enough. So yeah, I just had this moment sitting there watching this thinking like, is Safan gone or not? And what are the people in the group thinking about that? So yeah. For some completeness, Jessica Warner-Judd got 7th in 2:24.45, again on debut. 9th all-time in the British list now with that run, and has a half marathon PR of 67.06. So great run from Jessica. Emily Sisson was 2:25 in 8th, and Molly Seidel was a DNF. So it's a tough one for Molly. I reckon Molly might have been having a shocking day and stepped off. If you look at where she stepped off, I was like, I'm not convinced that isn't where her hotel was. just stepped off and went to the hotel instead of like having to go through Central Park and deal with all that garbage. They do this. Like elites do this, man. Elites do it.
No, of
So,
course. It's just funny. There's levels to the game, man. But I did want to ask you, you sent me a number of women running a sub-3 at New York and how that has drastically increased. Like, do we know why this is happening?
yeah, so shout out to Fast Women on Instagram. Go look at this post. They've got a graph of the number of women running sub-3 from like 1971 all the way up. Now, of course, the easy thing is to look at 2016 and go, oh, yep, there's an uptick there with the super shoes. And certainly that played a role. That played a role in, pure speeds at that stage, right? But that, I don't know if we've seen, if you look at the last 2 years, that's 203 women that have broken it, which is a significant jump from right around 75, right, from the previous little while. So there's been a significant jump in the last 2 years. The question is why? It's hard to know. I think weather's a factor this year, but not last year. I mean, maybe last year the weather was good as well, but not as good as this year, so fine. I think one thing that's probably increasing or improving marathon times in general is like the knowledge and availability and the advice and the training methodology for the marathon is certainly getting better these days. And I think it's more available as well. So women are probably piecing it together for themselves or having people coach them better. I think that's part of it. The running boom, I think, is a big driver in this. So it certainly helps. And that running boom is often a younger crowd who are going to be more likely to run sub-3. There's also more prominence in the marathons. So people are stepping up quicker and running more marathons and perhaps even straddling the marathon and other things. Right, so Safan Hassan is kind of still track, but kind of still marathon as well, which historically would not have been the case either. So I think those factors are playing a role as well. So, and then maybe there's some efforts. I know Nike have the Moonshot project, which is sort of around this sort of thing. So maybe that's part of it as well.
Interesting. I hope someone does a deep dive into this. I'd love to see the data behind the reason behind it because it can't just be by accident. So let's see. Maybe someone does. Doctor's office. We got a couple of people in the doctor's office this week. Victor Wembanyama. He's a French basketball player in the NBA.
So we talked about Victor in the doctor's office last year about how he got a blood clot and he was going to be out for a period of time. So I wanted to bring this up. I wanted to bring this up to sort of bring it back to people's minds. So we talked about him having to sit out and missed most of last year. And I said he might actually not be able to come back depending on what the situation is. He's obviously back. So obviously they've determined that the clot wasn't a problem that he needs ongoing anticoagulation for, right? So blood thinning. But he's dominating this year. And he looks to have bulked up significantly, which is helping him because he was quite a skinny guy. This guy's like 7 foot 1,000. He's so tall. He's like, anyways, he's a freak. Anyway, point being, he's bulked up significantly. And why I wanted to bring this up was partially to bring back Victor so people could chase it up. But the second thing is in the NBA and in like professional football, and I'm talking about soccer in Europe, you have this phenomenon where they play more than they train because they play like 3 times a week. So you can barely train around that because you're prioritizing freshness for the game rather than improvement. So these guys can often not really develop much outside of playing time. So when you're talking about development, I'm talking about pure skill stuff potentially, but also more importantly, physically. So it's hard to bulk up for these guys who are playing so much because they can't really train much and they're playing a ton. So there's a huge caloric output. So having time off like Victor Wembanyama had really helps for him to like bulk up is kind of where I was getting at there.
One other person in the doctor's room, Eli Katoa. Who is he?
Eli Katoa. He's a Tongan rugby league player. So there was a rugby league international over the weekend. This was ugly. I sent you this video. I don't think you saw it or you watched it, but it's quite interesting. So he had a huge head knock in the warm-up. He then was allowed to play because officials hadn't seen the head knock in the warm-up, even though it was on TV and on social. They said they were disappointed that they didn't see this, right? But 2 members of the staff, the Tonga medical staff, assessed him after the warm-up and the collision and considered feedback from the teammates as well and Katoa himself, but he wasn't given an HIA, head injury assessment. He's then been passed fit to play. He was forced off in the 10th minute after a collision with his teammate, a head knock at that point. So he has a second head knock.
Wow.
He then goes off, gets an HIA, and passes it. So then he goes back on. Now he's forced off a second time after stumbling after a tackle on one of the other guys in the 51st minute. So then he sits on the sideline, right? He's had 3 head knocks. He's sitting on the sideline and gets concussion symptoms, gets oxygen put on himself, and has seizure-like activity. And then he ends up in hospital and he ends up getting brain surgery or skull surgery, more accurately, to relieve the pressure because he's probably got bleeding on the brain. So after the skull is basically a solid compartment. So you have to relieve pressure. You actually just cut a little bit. You put a little hole in it so that you can remove the pressure from that. So, I mean, the takeaway message here is it's a really ugly situation. People are calling for people's jobs. I would say there's a couple of factors here. The first factor is he's one of the Tongans' best players, and it was an important game for them. So that's a hard decision to make. Period, full stop. And this is part of the reason I didn't go into sports medicine, because it's actually an easy decision, which is you've had a head knock, mate, you're out. You're not doing this. But the reality of that is not so easy. It's the first thing. Second thing is he would have wanted to play, and on some level, you have to stop him, prevent him from himself, but on some level, he's also allowed to choose. Third factor, your risk of injury, including concussion, post-initial concussion, is significant. So, I mean, it's just, it's a messy situation. It's hard. Like, no one wants this. No one thinks this is a good outcome. But yeah, it's really messy and really
That
nasty.
is a wild story. Wow, what a story. 3 knocks here. Wish him everything of the best in his recovery from that. I'm sure it'll take a while. Seen on social, this is a new feature we've added to the podcast. What have we seen on social, and how do we want to help people this week?
I saw someone make the comment that they don't do weights, only do calisthenics because it was better for power to weight ratio. And I understand why they may think this, but I could not disagree more. So power to weight ratio has 2 factors, weight and power, right? And technically power is about force applied at speed. And you can work that across the full spectrum. So a slow movement can have high power because it's a high force at a low speed, and a very fast movement can be low force, high speed, and the product of those things is both power, right? Or you work classically for power development, you work in the middle where it's high speed, moderate weight, right? So Olympic lifting, etc. Calisthenics will not build power to weight ratio at all times. Some of the time it will if it's the right dose, the right resistance, and you're moving it at the right speed, but oftentimes it won't. And it's harder to apply that because there are very distinct things. For instance, I want to develop my chin-up force. That's great if I can do a chin-up. If I can't do a chin-up, I'm in a lot of trouble, right? Once I can do 10, 15, 20 chin-ups, then all of a sudden, at some point, it becomes too light for me. And then I have to add weight. Then it becomes hard as well. So the point I'm making here is you may be better off developing power using external implements, classically med balls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I also don't think that the muscle mass that you add as a result of any strength training is going to impair power to weight ratio. I think we've talked about this before, but that is functional weight, right? Versus, let's call it non-functional weight of the organs. And then proportionately, your organs become less of a percentage of your total mass. I see you with a quizzical look. Are you trying to work out what calisthenics is?
Yes, it's Google's telling me calisthenics is a form of exercise that uses a person's body weight and requires little to no equipment. Is that right?
Correct. So it's body weight training, yeah, basically.
Yeah, it's got a photo of a guy, shirt allergy, just using his body weight, lifting himself up, just using his hands suspended off the ground.
The calisthenics advocates have shirt allergies as well. Yes, that's generally the way it is.
Okay, let's get out of here. Before we do, what are we watching this weekend? Bunch of stuff on, right?
Yeah, I mean, I sent you the rugby, the list of rugby games on this weekend is absurd. So I'll watch a couple of those. I mean, some of them are terrible. Like Japan-Ireland's not going to be a good game, just like the USA versus Scotland was not a good game at the weekend. Marbella 70.3 world champs are on, so we're watching that Saturday and Sunday because it is women's race one day, men's race the other day. So, yeah, what about you, mate? What are you watching? Did you copy my homework again?
Same, exactly the same. And then adding Manchester United into that back. I don't actually know who we're playing this weekend, but 4 games unbeaten now. Not bad.
I was going to say, you're 4 games unbeaten, so it doesn't matter if you're playing anymore. Now you're arrogant enough to forget about it. Like, it doesn't matter who we're playing, we're going to win.
Exactly. No, we're definitely not there, and probably due a loss this weekend.
Is that guy finally? Did that guy finally cut his hair? The guy that's been growing his hair into Man United.
No, he's back to 0 now. So we won 3 games in a row. Last weekend we drew, which sets his timer back to 0. So now 0 games won in a row, and he will only cut his hair once Manchester United wins 5 games in a row. Poor guy. Yeah, I commented on his Instagram and said he's going to need government intervention because that guy's only cutting his hair probably in like 2028 or something. It's crazy. Okay, let's get out of here. Thank you so much, every single person, for listening, downloading, streaming this podcast. Thanks to all our partners. David, thank you to you for putting this together. Really appreciate it. We'll be back next week. New episode every single Friday.
Thanks, mate.